What's up everyone? In today's video, the goal with the M3 shell is to make it into a roller. I got a steering rack for it, I got front knuckles, a bunch of nuts and bolts, we're gonna put those on, I'm gonna get some janky wheels for it, and the end goal is to make it into a roller, finally. And maybe, just maybe, we're gonna put the V10 into the actual M3 shell at the end of the video. I'm not entirely sure yet, but stick around because you might be in for a treat. I'm not entirely sure yet. And on that exciting note, welcome back to Yev's Builds. Alright, so today we're putting on new KW coilovers onto the shell. Let's see how they look like, dude. I'm just kidding, they're my stock was off my black one. I figured since we are making this shell into a roller first and foremost, I'm gonna put my stock suspension back on since I am not selling my black M3 anytime soon, or if at all. So I still have the stock suspension. Fortunately, I never sold it. Again, I'm just making this into a roller. I wanna get this thing into the garage and put the motor into it just to at least see how this potentially can be and will be eventually, you know what I mean? You know what, I realize I'm missing a few parts for the rear of the suspension. So let's go pick them up. This right here is a 17 mil bolt. That's gonna go into the bottom of the knuckle right there. You can see this little guy right here. That's right there. That goes through the shock itself. Turns out I already got one of these couplers here, but as you can tell, it's pretty filthy. New one it is, baby. This thing, we want this thing perfect. Next up, this entire assembly piece. There's a little waterproofing gasket over it. Now let's jack this thing up. Then of course, tighten these guys up. Put this little gentleman over here and tighten the final dude. Later on, of course, I will be putting on reinforcement plates right here, but for the time being, I do not have them. And then of course, the exact same thing on the other side. Can't tell already, it rains a lot here in Portland. So I gotta put a tarp over it. Otherwise, the thing is just gonna be a giant rust bucket. So very fortunately for me, I've never sold my OEM steering wheel from my black M3. If you don't know, the current steering wheel on the M3 is an actual AZA steering wheel, custom made, beautiful, great job guys, shout out to you, appreciate it, thank you so much. But this is the OEM one, and turns out I'm actually gonna need this for this application today. That way I can actually roll the shell around and turn it any way I want it. So if you don't already know, this shaft right here has a little notch right here. That's supposed to be pointing all the way down because the steering wheel itself has a little notch on the bottom as well, and those two little notches are supposed to line up. Ah, one tooth off. There we go. Woohoo! Like I said earlier, this subframe was already modified for a V10 to fit in here, but I need to kind of mess around with this tab right here because as you can see, the gap in between the top and bottom is pretty big. For the time being, I will just put these bolts in. We'll see how this goes, but we'll figure this out a little later. Next up, we're gonna have to put this rod into in that. You can see there's one big tooth over here, and up in this joint, there's a little space right for that big tooth. So we're gonna line those up. Oh wow, that was so nice and smooth. Also, in the time being, I found a set of E90 wheels. They're in pretty good condition. I got them for pretty cheap. These will do just fine for the shell for the time being. Since I don't have any lugs, I figured I'm gonna get some studs. The studs will be a temporary thing for this thing because the original plan for the V10 M3 is to have center lock wheels. But for the time being, for me to roll around, these will do just fine. I'm not even gonna put Loctite on these. I'm just gonna screw them in, put the wheels on, and roll the shell around. During the time of me putting these wheels on, I noticed that the wheels aren't spinning. They're spinning now because I took the diff off. Once the diff was on the ground, I tried to rotate it and it doesn't spin whatsoever. It doesn't budge. It might be dry. I'm not entirely sure. I didn't drain anything. I didn't look at anything. It doesn't look like anything was ever drained out of here. So I'm not entirely sure. It's not a big problem because this is gonna have a different LSD unit in it. I'll take this one apart anyway. As you can see, these bushings are shot completely. For the time being, for me to roll the shell around, I took the diff off, and I think it's safe to say that we could put this shell on the ground now, dude. Let's do it. She's on the ground, dude. She's on the ground.